Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marble Snap video. So in this one, we got some decks for tonight's new location, Krakoa. So this location is Ego at Home, a little mini Ego on turn 5, where the game takes over and plays your cards for you and your opponent. Now, I don't think you actually have to do any really specific deck building for this one, as it's not exactly changing the outcome of a lot of what's going on in the game. It's just there's a bit more randomness added to turn 5, and you're going to see a theme in the decks we have here tonight, where a lot of Scarlet Witch and a lot of Storm, because that just helps us turn off this random element, because I imagine most people don't really want that to be happening. So pool 1 deck here, both pool 1 and pool 2 are going to be Dino decks, as I think they're the most resilient to some randomness happening on turn 5. Worst case, the game doesn't play our Dino, we can follow up with our Dino on the final turn. But pretty standard Dino deck. We do add Scarlet Witch into the deck here though, as we do want a way to turn off that randomness, as usually it is less helpful than not. So get rid of that if we can. Other than that, just a bunch of good cards here. Just quality pool 1 cards that help us win the game. Ant-Man usually not in the Dino decks, but we have enough stuff to swarm the board. It's not too bad. Solid early game here with things like Angela, Sentinel, Lizard, etc. Nightcrawler for some of those lockdown locations, as well as Mr. Fantastic. Cosmo to shut down the opponents on reveal stuff, Moon Girl for double dinos, White Queen for good tempo and information, and Chavez for a bit of that extra consistency in drawing the cards we're looking for. Moving on to pool 2 here, the core of the deck is pretty much the same, however we do get access to some better cards, including Storm, who gives us another way of shutting off this kind of annoying location, so we don't have to deal with the randomness on turn 5, and she's just really good with the fact that we have a lot of early tempo cards in this. So Angela always good with Storm, bunch of cheap 1-drops, Nightcrawler's always good with both Angela and Storm, Sunspot as well, because we can just choose to pump him up if he's in the Storm lane. So a lot more focus on the early game, have Scarlet Witch in here too, just as another consistent way to shut off the location. Then we have Cosmo for some protection, as people have access to Shang-Chi in pool 2. And then a little bit lower top end with just Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. And again, Chavez for a final turn play and more consistency. And then we have our pool 3 upgrade to Devil Dino. Now you could also go in a Darkhawk direction with this deck. It's actually one I've been playing a lot of and really enjoying it, but I'm focusing on a more pool 3 only focused one, as it's a bit more budget for people. And if you do happen to have things like Darkhawk, Rock Slide, etc., you could very easily sub in those cards for some of the ones we have here. But the main additions we get are things like Dr. Doom, who is just a really good card right now and helps us play into our Storm lane. She-Hulk, just very, very good with our Sunspot. And then kind of an underrated card in pool 3, and especially in Dino, is Agent Coulson. Sometimes the cards he gives us are relevant, and he's just a pretty solid tempo play that keeps our hand nice and big for the Devil Dinosaur. Because we do have quite a few ways of keeping our hand big here, you actually could consider placing Moon Girl with something else, but I opted to have her for a bit of redundancy. But other than that, it's just some upgrades to the pool 2 version of Dinosaur. Next deck we have here is Old Reliable Sarah Control, one of the best decks in the game right now that isn't Shuri. So Sarah has always been running Scarlet Witch to deal with pesky locations. Now it's even more useful to get rid of the annoying turn 5 Ego. Other than that, it's just a very stock build. I will say the one flex spot in this list I would say is Polaris. I think Polaris is a really good card, but this is definitely the spot you can kind of change up for something else if you want. Some people like Maximus for the better stats to play on the final turn. And then another card I've been seeing people try out is Juggernaut to act as a similar effect as Old Arrow to push someone out of a lane you're trying to win on the final turn. I think both those options are pretty solid if you want to try something different, but Polaris is pretty good as well. I think Polaris is actually better as just a pure tempo play if you're not playing her on the final turn. Other than that, we have Zabu and Sarah to reduce the cost of our good cards, most notably our tech cards in Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Bishop has the nice package with Mysterio to buff him up, and then our Killmonger and Nova package to spread a bunch of power out across the board. Other than that, we just have a few good tempo 2-drops in our Sentinel, Lizard, and our Scarlet Witch. So if you're looking for something that is good at stopping the location while still having game versus a lot of the other decks out there right now, Serra Control seems like a great choice. Another really solid deck here post changes has been Doom Wave. So the idea with this deck is we play a lot of good cards to seize priority in the early game. Things like Sunspot, Iceman, good 2-drops, and Scorpion and Lizard, and then Mr. Fantastic and Polaris as our premier 3-drops. And then usually on turn 5, we are trying to wave the opponent while floating 2 mana, and that will allow us to play a very powerful endgame card in either Arrow, who really appreciates the limitation of wave, or Dr. Doom, who lets us go a bit wide in combination with a nice big She-Hulk, who will only cost 2 because of the mana we floated. We have White Queen just as a solid tempo play on 4 that gives us information and sometimes gives us a big card to play if we don't draw one of our other big cards. And Shang-Chi, as he is also a really good way to help close out the game. So I really like this list. I think if you're looking for a way to still play Arrow that isn't Deathwave or the Sandman ramp deck, which are both pretty good as well, this is a really solid choice and is a lot of fun as well. Next up, if you're not someone who wants to get rid of the RNG of the turn 5 ego effect, but instead wants to embrace it, we have one of my favorite decks in the game. I'm not saying this is going to be a great climbing deck by any means, but if you're looking to just have a good time post-infinite or just have some fun in general, Agatha Hela. This is a deck I've covered on my channel before, and it's honestly one of my favorite decks to just mess around with. Hela's always been a favorite card of mine. She's always been RNG and inconsistent. So, I figure, well, if we're gonna be going in on the RNG stuff, might as well go full RNG with the location and with Agatha at the wheel. We have Wave and Sif as our main ways of getting Agatha down early or out of our hand. Jubilee helps us cheat big things into play. Ghost Rider lets us bring back whatever big thing we discard. Hellcow and MODOK let us discard a bunch of stuff. MODOK was a big boost to this deck as we can discard our whole hand into potentially bringing the Hela out on the final turn off the top, or using something like Jubilee to pull Hela out of the deck, as there usually won't be many cards left in the deck. Spider-Woman is just a decent tempo play on 5 and another solid card to bring back with our Hela. And then we just have some standard big stuff in Giganto and Infinite, and Captain Marvel helps us offset the Hela RNG of cards going all over the place. So not exactly a deck that is going to be the most competitive, but if you're just looking to embrace the RNG and have a bit of fun, I can't recommend this highly enough. And last but not least, we have our Kitty Thanos Lockjaw. Kitty just released today, so figured we'd put a deck in here with her for anyone trying to experiment with her. I actually did a whole other video going over some day 1 Kitty decks. Been pretty impressed with her. And this is one of them, but if you don't have Kitty, you can also make a substitute here with another cheap 1-drop or even a Wasp. We're mainly using her just as a fodder to throw into the Lockjaw. That isn't as bad if we pull it out of Lockjaw, since we can just kind of pull her back to our hand. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Thanos Lockjaw list. We have a few big things here that we can cheat out into play with Lockjaw, such as Devil Dino, Dr. Doom, Chavez, She-Hulk, and obviously Thanos himself. Blue Marvel, not bad either, since we usually go kind of wide with our stones. And then everyone's favorite green little asshole, Leech, to shut off all the fun things your opponent might be trying to do. Shang-Chi for a bit of interaction. Psylocke acting as essentially a second time stone to help us cheat out a big powerful turn 5 on turn 4. And then also just something for us to throw into the Lockjaw. And Sunspot, because sometimes our turns will be floating mana, and he obviously is good with She-Hulk, and then obviously the namesake of the deck, Lockjaw, who we're just chucking our stones and our early drops into in order to get big things to pop on out. So there we have it. Those are all the decks for this new location. I think this is going to be a pretty amusing one, and I am happy that it's only going to be for 24 hours instead of 48 like the old ones, because I think this is one people will definitely get tired of pretty quickly, but I think it's going to be amusing in the short time we have it at a boosted rate. As always, the decks will be in the description if you want to import any of those into the game, but that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.